Hello?
Caroline, you good to go?
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you for the
I'll drop
invitation.
off to backstage, yeah?
All right, very good. Well, good day, everyone, and thank you for joining the session today. I'd like to talk today about driving operational excellence within an organization, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself and where I've been driving operational excellence. So, maybe first a little bit about me. My name is Carolyn, and my official title is Head of Continuous Improvement and Lean for Royal Philips. So maybe some of you have heard of Philips. So I'm Head of Business Transformation for essentially the entire company. I drive the Lean and Continuous Improvement activities across the entire enterprise. So that includes marketing and sales, our business groups, which design and determine the innovation portfolio. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, and I've worked at various companies, General Motors for 19 years, life science company Perkin Elmer Electronics, and Danaher for 11 years, an industrial conglomerate, and I've been at Philips now for 7 years. So for those of you, just maybe an update a little bit about Philips and what we do, just to give you some perspective. Many of you probably have some Philips product in your house, either a vacuum cleaner or something in your kitchen or a toothbrush. But in 2015, Royal Philips has been working on converting itself from more an industrial conglomerate to more of a health tech company. And so this journey from starting out as selling light bulbs back 130 years ago, so this week is the 130th birthday of Royal Philips, from selling light bulbs 130 years ago to becoming a global health tech company is quite a journey. And as you can imagine, it takes um, a lot of different skills, and operational excellence is something that's absolutely required in a transformation of this size. So from really turning into selling things to selling systems, and not only systems, but systems that address the healthcare need across the world. So the vision of Philips today is to help the world with the quadruple aim. This is working on the patient experience, improving their health outcomes. Of course, the cost of care around the world is skyrocketing, so managing the cost of care is extremely important. And improving the work life of care providers, so those who are taking care of us in this journey. And one of the things that was extremely important last year during the COVID crisis was the ability for us to really enact and try out our healthcare strategy to see if it would work during this time. And we must say that during the COVID crisis, we really practiced what we want to become, and it helped quite a bit. And the operational excellence piece of the journey that we've been on for the last 7 years has helped quite a bit. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that. So when it comes to maybe my background, one of the things that really changed my life back in the 90s was I had the opportunity to work in a Toyota factory. And this was really the first exposure that I had to lean. And I have to say, working in this factory with a lot of Toyota managers at the time and really seeing the Toyota production system come to life in this factory changed a lot of the ways that I looked at what I wanted to do in life and the way I did work. And when I came to Philips, we were doing a lot of things with operational excellence, but it wasn't very coordinated. And if you can imagine, at the time I came, the company was over 110,000 people, and people came from different companies like I did, and everybody wanted to bring their way of working to Philips. And so what I found was many different ways of working, and when people were trying to get together on operational excellence topics, they spent more time talking about which methodology they were going to use versus which problem they were trying to solve. And so one of the very first tasks that we started with in 2014 and then into 2015 was aligning on core tools. So when you're doing any kind of transformation, and especially in operational excellence, you need to work on the tools that you're going to use. And we'll talk more about the leadership aspect later, so I don't want to forget that piece. But the beginning piece was working on what tools we're going to use. And here you see our Philips Excellence Circle. And we focused on 8 core tools, and specifically in the very beginning, we focused on the ones in the triangle. So we worked on problem solving, daily management, the Hoshin planning, or the strategic aspect of looking at which lean tools you need to use to implement your strategic roadmap, and of course, a lot of Kaizen. So we spent a lot of time just aligning on which tool we want to use to create the common nomenclature. And maybe a question is, why did we pick these tools? And for me, it's really quite simple. And also, when you're trying to do a transformation across 100,000 people, the message needs to be very clear. And for us, daily management helps you understand if you're winning or losing. So you see in this picture here, the daily management helped us understand, select, identify, and develop which key performance indicators we wanted to drive. And when you see something's green or red, especially if you have a red, what you'd like to do is figure out, okay, let's use a problem-solving methodology to try to understand why we have a red, and that led us to problem solving. And as many of you know, if you have a problem, one way to identify how to fix it is to use the tool value stream mapping. So we used value stream mapping once we did some problem solving activities to help us understand where those Kaizen events should be planned. And then, of course, we did plan the Kaizen events to help us understand how to fix it and then get back to daily management. So this, to me, was a very simple way of measure if you're winning or losing. If you're losing, try to understand through problem solving how you're going to fix it. Value stream mapping helps you zoom in on where in the process you need to deep dive and do a Kaizen event. And the Kaizen event, of course, helps you understand how am I going to fix it. So it was a relatively simple recipe, but I think it had never really been so explicitly explained that this was the recipe to use. So it took us some time to get there. And of course, along the journey, we also learned a few things that enhanced our initial lean approach. And many of you out there are using Agile as well. And then a few years ago, we tested in our marketing area. How do we combine the best of the Agile methodologies and lean to create what we call the best, better together? So the best of both approach. And so what we did was experiment in our marketing environment. How do we really embed the lean tools, the daily management, problem solving, value stream mapping, Kaizen, along with the Agile methodology? So based off the SAFe framework, where we're looking at how do we plan using backlogs? How do we execute a scrum? How do we do the daily stand-up meetings that help us drive us forward through the scrum process? And what we learned was they work actually quite well together, lean and agile. And so many of the origins of agile came from lean. And putting the two together in a non-software environment also showed us this combination of lean and agile is quite powerful. And so now we're embarking on a journey of how to take our lean and continuous approach to the next level. So that's this one. I've spent now about the first 10 minutes talking about tools, and I think it's important to make sure that you're in any leadership journey, you have the right tools. But of course, every journey is led by leadership, and I'd like to spend some of the bulk of the time now talking about what leadership efforts did we engage in to get the leadership moving to help support now the 85,000 people that are at Philips in this journey. And here I think it's important to say that leaders really are the single most important factor in any lean transformation. So, I've done lean for over the last 30 years, and I've seen many tools, and I've seen various levels of engagement of leadership. But I think using this experience at Philips helped me understand that you had to invest a lot of time in the leadership change in order to really accelerate it. So, I do chat with a lot of people about their lean transformations, and I get a lot of questions sometimes about how come I'm doing lean in a certain part of the organization, but I can't seem to get it to go broader, or how do I get senior leaders to help us drive the transformation? And this has led me to the fact that when you're going to start something like this, invest a lot of time in the top leadership, because if your top leadership understands the journey, they help the rest of the organization move forward. And so I mentioned earlier that Philips is now 130 years old, and maybe how difficult it was to come in as a new person and really to design and execute upon the operational excellence culture journey that we did. So I'll talk a little bit about the behaviors. Um, so when we work with the behavioral piece of change, of course, like every company, we talk about the behaviors we'd like leadership to have. And for us, we have the 5 behaviors here, and I'll just take a minute to talk about them. So we talk about customer first, of course, um, eager to improve and inspire, teaming up to win, take ownership to deliver fast, and quality integrity always. And sometimes when people talk about cultural behaviors, they become very, very abstract. And one of the ways to help people understand what that means for them is to link practical things to what these behaviors mean. So some examples of how do you really live these behaviors. And so the new cultural behaviors are a few years old. And during this time frame, we were doing a lot of education with our senior leaders. And one thing that was very important as we rolled out the behaviors was linking the continuous improvement aspects of this operational excellence journey to the behavioral changes that we needed leaders to see. And what we see on this slide is how we linked the various lean tools that I explained earlier to the behaviors. And so the one behavior that really speaks to operational excellence and lean is eager to improve and inspire. And here you see, when we talk about problem solving, well, how do you live being eager to improve and inspire? Well, usually when you're trying to improve, you're going to fix something. And so we linked problem solving to this behavior. We talk about coaching through this problem solving process in order to help teams improve and inspire. So you see through this slide that we tried to really make lean and continuous improvement very tangible for our leadership during the new behaviors that we set out. I think another thing that helped us quite a bit on this journey was really understanding that for a coach in this environment of operational excellence to be an effective coach, you obviously had to train them. And one of the things we tried to do, and we started doing in 2016, was we put over 1,000 of the top executives of the company through something we called Executive Lean Leadership Training. And it's a 5-day intensive training on lean, talking about the 8 core lean tools that I showed earlier at the circle. And more specifically, what is the leader's role in driving the usage of these 8 tools? Because I use the very simple analogy. If you have your child is playing on a team and they have a coach, it certainly helps, independent of what sport your child is playing, that the coach knows how to play the game. Because if the coach doesn't know how to play football or soccer, your team might not win too many games because the coach can't really help the team win. So our thought process was, yes, there are many people out there that need to use the tools, but more importantly, it's very important for the leaders to help the teams through the journey of which tool do I use, how do I set the right priorities, how do I use the tools correctly. The other thing that it helped us do a lot was when you think about 1,000 executives, and many of them did not have a lean background at all. So we tried to connect people. And when you're doing a cultural transformation, a common language in a culture is very important. So the fact that 1,000 executives went through the same training, had the same nomenclature and language, and were coached in the same way on how to coach using the tools, helped us really a lot in accelerating this operational excellence journey. Not only did we train people, but part of this program was for a certification, because I think it's important to train people, but if people can't demonstrate this capability after they've gone through the training, it's not quite as effective. So we spent time getting these people certified, and the certification path for an executive to get his continuous improvement practitioner certification was to execute Kaizen. There were certain criteria that were defined for what kind of Kaizen could could qualify as certification. For example, in one of our commercial organizations, the Kaizen had to have a target improvement of 100,000 euros of profit. So it had to be something that was meaty. So we wanted the people to really think about a business problem that they could solve in their realm of responsibility that has some significant business impact, and that made a significant improvement in the organization that they worked in. So that worked out to be quite effective. And we continue to drive this 5-day executive lean leadership training through the company for new hires and anyone who moves into a leadership team in Philips. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this transformation, and as a reference, I've included a few articles that go into detail because we don't have as much time to go into, but I'll take the essence of this article, and I think these slides will be distributed. So if you go to the Planet Lean and you put in search engine Philips, you'll see a little bit about the story that we talked about during the last 5 years. And so here for reference are the 2 articles. And what I wanted to go to is maybe spend some time on this slide before we move to questions. So one of the things I think that we did differently than maybe some other companies as well was we looked at this lean story, what I say, holistically. And instead of focusing on one area of the company, which is the traditional way of doing these things, is to maybe look at operations or one specific organization within your entire company, we chose to take the whole elephant at once. And I know that seems a little bit overwhelming, and I think it was, but we understood, especially at Philips, we are a very matrixed organization. And so everything is really done end to end in the value stream in a matrixed organization. So if you don't address the whole value stream and you look at maybe just one part of the value stream, you really don't get as much benefit as if you tie everybody together. So when I talked about these 1,000 leaders, we talked about 1,000 leaders across every organization in our company. So in marketing, in sales, in service, in operations, in quality, in finance, in human resources. And so it was quite a daunting task to get these 1,000 leaders from every organization in the company going. And they've all been through the 5-day executive leadership training. And this training leads me to point number 2. It really transformed the way people were thinking. And if you can imagine, when you tell a group of 1,000 executives that they're going to sit through 5-day training, the first thing that usually comes to their mind is, how do I take 5 days out of my schedule? I don't know how to move everything out of the way for a week to do this training. But we did find a way, and it helped a lot, that our CEO was quite motivational when it came to this is a very significant success factor when you think about the healthcare journey that we're on, going from the light bulb company to a healthcare company. So this was a very important motivational factor that it was very much stress from our executive committee that this transformation is necessary. So if I think back to when I came to Philips in 2014, that leads me to point number 3. It's important to not be afraid to dance. And what I mean by that is when you're new to a company and you're driving a transformation of this size, you're not necessarily bringing along 100 people to help you. So it's important to understand, how do you get key members of the organization to stand up next to you and be what we call the first followers to help you drive this transformation. And so if I think back to the late 2014 when I started in early 2015, what I did was I identified some key people who I label as first followers. And here I include this link on YouTube, and it's leadership lessons, and it talks about how do you start a movement and get your first followers to come join you. And one of the things we did was we identified some first followers, so people who were generally open to change, who were not the people who looked at something new and said, I don't want to try that, I'd rather wait till somebody else does it. So we really looked for proactive people who were open. And I think our 2 first followers were not typical. In fact, one of my first followers was someone who's been with the company for 30 years, and the only place he's ever worked. But he was extremely open to change and very much willing to experiment with new ways of working. And as we experimented with these new ways of working with this first follower, we saw results that we typically didn't see. So we addressed essentially a new acquisition. We tested new methodologies. We showed people at Phillips that you could do things with the speed that they had not seen before. And I think the key thing here was picking the first followers, doing a lot of things with the first followers, which leads me to point number 4, was making your early adopter a rock star. So by doing some very unconventional things, driving some improvement activities, and getting some significant results with this first followers, we shined a spotlight a little bit on this person. And so we saw that people started to look at this early adopter and his organization and saw some of the things that were doing that were driving significant business impact. And people started getting curious. And people asked us, well, what are the kinds of things that you're doing to help drive these improvements so quickly? So that helped us get more people up and running, more people interested in the movement, more people inquiring about how do we drive more operational excellence with other parts of the organization. And this led us to the executive lean leadership movement that teach lean to everybody. Now, have we taught all 80,000 people in the company lean and executive lean leadership? No, but we've adjusted our way of teaching through the different levels. So we still have 5-day executive lean leadership. This is called lean leadership for the different layers in our organization. So a similar version, but something for the different layers. It has a different language about coaching. We have lean basics where everyone is essentially targeted to take part of our lean basics training. We have things called continuous improvement agents. So this is kind of a light certification. So this year we're certifying 1,000 continuous improvement agents in this drive to get more people into the lean culture. So again, culture is something that people do inherently. And if you can teach lean to everyone in the company, it becomes something that everyone does everywhere. So our mantra these days is to really continue to deepen and broaden lean skills and capabilities to everyone in the company. I think it's important when you start a journey to focus on a few critical tools. And when I think back to when I came to Phillips in 2014, I had never seen so many lean tools that were available to someone in a company. But that also leads to a little bit of confusion because if you think about what I said earlier, that leaders are coaches, when you have such a broad range of tools that you can use, it's difficult if you're not practiced. Which one do you pick up? So you could be picking up a hammer to fix a sink because you don't know how to use the tool correctly. So back to my earlier slide about the 4 key tools that we use, we really spent time focusing a very broad group of people to focus on a few key tools to really drive this cultural understanding. And these tools essentially were daily management, problem solving, and Kaizen. So if you know when you're losing, if you can problem solve to figure out why you're losing, and you can do a Kaizen event to get to the winning side of the game, that was enough for us for a while. And so we pushed aside some of the more complex tools at the very beginning and really tried to drive common usage, common nomenclature of the 3 basic tools at the beginning. I think another thing that was very important after that was driving a culture of feedback, because when we talk about leadership being the key driver and the key success factor of this transformation, there's a lot of coaching that goes on in this leadership rank. And so we've started to drive a culture of giving feedback, because a lot of times the feedback of what behavior you are not following, not role modeling, is very important. And so driving this culture of continuous feedback, so we call it anytime feedback. And essentially, you can either do this personally or systematically. And in our HR systems, you can give anytime feedback. So anyone can give anyone feedback in the system, or any feedback can be requested. So in terms of driving feedback, you can try to do it like I would do without a system. The people who maybe sometimes are more hesitant in getting the feedback about what leadership behaviors am I not demonstrating in driving this transformation, you can actually request feedback from peers, from your supervisor, from your team members. So an art of 360 feedback was specifically targeted about what things do I need to do better in order to help me as a leader along this journey. And maybe to the last point that comes from one of my articles is understanding the role of communication. And if there was one thing I think that we should have done a better job of was really communicating the change process to the organization. So there were a lot of things happening and there were a lot of things changing. I think one important thing is really communicating to the masses of people why you're doing something and maybe more of the successes that you're generating to help people understand that this way of working is really driving significant change. So if there's one slide in here that I would kind of keep, I would keep this one in here as kind of a simple recipe of how you would drive this operational excellence journey if you're attempting a change of this size at your company. And so that is the end of the content. So I will turn this over to Q&A. And I'm not sure if we have anything in the chat.
Wonderful session, Caroline. Yes, we have Chris Gunning. He's mentioned couple of comments. Love it, Caroline. Really nicely explained and an engaging story. The rate and pace of technological, digital, and transformational change in organizations these days is like we've never seen before. Are there any best practices or tips out there to ensure you're part of a team in advance proactively rather than needing to come back in retroactively post change and go back and address any waste?
Yeah, so I think part of the transformation, so when you talk about digital transformation in organizations, that's of course part of it. So if you go back to the slide that we talked about, the healthcare continuum, a very big piece of this healthcare continuum is changing the way we do things in healthcare to a digital way. So especially during the COVID pandemic, you can see the amount of patients that hospitals were dealing with, the ability to look at the data. So if you've ever been in the hospital, and hopefully most of you haven't, right? But if you go to the hospital, there are a lot of disconnected ways of working. And so you might go to your doctor. They might send you to a specialist in the hospital. The specialist in the hospital might send you a different specialist in the hospital. And the way these things work today or historically is very siloed organizations. And if you think about digital transformation, it's important in the future that all these things are connected. And back to this healthcare continuum that Philips has, it's not only just your doctor in the hospital, it's about how do you get back home. And so one of the things in our healthcare continuum is how do you get out of the hospital sooner? How do you continue the care that your doctor can monitor you in a digital way? So I think using these operational aspects on the transformation that Philips is on does very much cover the digital transformation. And maybe back to COVID last year, we talked a lot about very strategic things on this healthcare continuum slide, but we didn't, it's a journey. And so we hadn't really seen if this works. And COVID was an accelerator. So many of the things that we had in our strategy, this being a healthcare continuum from beginning to end, really played out in last year because we had to, under very much stressed conditions, see if elements of our strategy that were already working, including the digital transformation, were helping. So it stress tested us a lot, but it also confirmed that our strategy going digital, transformation in organizations is very helpful. The other thing that I do that I didn't mention in my title is I'm in an organization called Business Transformation. So continuous improvement at Philips is in something we call business transformation. And business transformation is the organization that drives all the transformational activities in the company. And for example, there are 18 live transformations that are going on within Philips, and they're broad. So one of them is marketing transformation. And I don't want to go into too many details, but essentially redesigning the way we do marketing. So we are using these operational excellence tools in these things like marketing transformation or quality transformation. So we see that these operational excellence tools help us with the speed and also help us adjust to the things that we learn. So COVID also taught us things that we need to correct. And I think by using these tools, building these capabilities, we were able to see that in the digital world, in a world of constant transformation, these tools were very helpful.
Excellent. Let's see if there are any other questions. Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. Good luck with the next steps in the business and digital transformations. I have a couple of questions
Sure.
related to similar topics, right? So you guys have been in the journey for a good many years, in the last few years, right? The challenges that you started out at the beginning are probably very different from the challenges that you face today,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
essentially kind of preparing you for the next 3-4 years, right?
Yep.
If you could do a bit of a compare and contrast on
Yep.
where you were versus where you're now and where you want to be.
That's easy because we're kind of and actually I have a chat with my boss right after this. I think at the beginning when we were building the teams, and it was important I didn't talk very much about how to build the teams, but when I came to Philips and I said that there were a lot of different ways of working. So first thing was assembling all the people who had this experience or had the right job title but were working in a different way. So it was aligning all these people on a common way of working. And so we spent a lot of time focusing on their lean and continuous improvement skills. And so now essentially I have this, a couple hundred people who have very good lean and continuous improvement skills. But as we move more into these 18 transformations that we're driving today, it requires an enhanced set of skill set. And so if I look at the team and what we were driving in terms of capabilities years ago is very much strong, and maybe only lean capabilities. But today we're more looking at a portfolio of skills. And this is another transformation inside for the teams themselves. So we're talking about capability build and change management. Because if you think about a transformation, change management, the ability to take people along the journey is very important. So we're enhancing the current team skills with change management skills. We talked about 18 huge transformations. This requires some more project management skills. So we're upgrading the team with project management skills. It helps, we need to drive more performance management. So there's a different type of performance management. So we have these things called 6 Philips excellence practices: continuous improvement as practice, performance management, change management, project management. So now what we're looking at is taking this army of lean and continuous improvement people that we have and upgrading their skills with change management. And it really depends on where you work in the organization. So I wouldn't say that everybody's upgrading change management. I think it depends on where you work, which transformations are active, and which of these skills that I've described do we need to enhance. Because if one area may not be going through as much change as another, might not need as many change management as where more transformations are happening. So I think upgrading the capabilities with our Philips excellence practices has been a big change. We're really starting that now as we move more. So the one good thing about the last 7 years is we were not very predictable. And if you look at, this is nothing that's not public. So if you look back in 2014, there were a lot of profit warnings. There was a lot of inconsistency in the ability to deliver to what we said we were going to do. And as everybody knows, the stock market rewards you when you're more consistent. And so the stock price of Philips has been relatively constant. And I would say actually in one of the decks in the back I didn't get to, the stock price has doubled over the last 5 years. So I think it says a lot about our ability to be more consistent, to do what we say we're going to do. And this has enabled us to move on to more transformative agenda. So we call it perform and transform, and you earn the right to transform when you demonstrate that you can perform. And so I think this ability to be more consistent, to do what you say you're going to do, has allowed us to focus a little bit less on the perform and spend more time on the transformative activities that really get you to the strategic area that's where you want to be going forward and being more long-term. Hopefully that answers your question.
Oh yeah, it does, and it actually, I actually noted down a few points here as well, and immediate reflection is that we definitely have to invite you back for our leadership conference that we have in October, because the theme of that topic is quite similar to what you just mentioned. How do you create the leadership that is going to be ready for the coming years?
It's difficult. I think I come across a lot of people who work in an organization trying to do lean, and they, it's more where some people work a bottoms up approach. And think a lot of people hope that if the bottoms up approach gets enough interest, maybe top management will see it. But you don't get the speed that you need that way. And I know it may be a little bit of a luxury that I've had at Philips because I came in interviewing with the CEO who said, I want this, and I want this as fast as you can do this. But I tell people who are kind of in the other situation, I mean, there are plenty of CEOs out there who want this and who want it now. And so you can spend 10 years trying to do a bottom up approach, or you can find some company, you don't have to actually interview with the CEO, but you can find companies out there, and there are many, where the CEO really wants this. So they've had a hallelujah moment. They're like, I've seen another company do this. So if you really want to get into a place where you're completely busy with doing this and you are living out your life passion, there are a lot of them. So if you find yourself in a company where you don't think leadership is really driving it, I'd say spend some fun time going to a place where you can feel that the leadership is driving it. And I would say, and it takes work to get there, but there are many. And I think you won't bang your head as hard if you find that the CEO is really leading the charge.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be kind of the defining moment for many of the companies especially in the next few years, with the challenge, the challenger group coming through, the startups, the digital companies, and some of the scale ups, which are challenging the traditional bastion of many of the old economy companies. So you're right. I mean, the CEO has to be as invested in it. Yeah. So I think that's very good. So so I was just looking at some of the notes here. No, I think that's a good summary of what we wanted to hear from you. I guess, and how you're doing it. In Phyllis, but more importantly, thanks for waking up at 4 o'clock. Actually, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I didn't plan on being in the West Coast for this, but I am in San Francisco today. But that's okay. I actually I'm booked solid for the next 6 hours, so this was only an hour earlier than I would have had to get up anyway.
Right. So thanks for doing that. And of course, some people in the audience may want to continue the discussion. Sure. So we can have a discussion, the continuation during the break. That's the RTA Connect that's coming up. But also, we encourage our audience to also come to our platform, our page on LinkedIn, where they can sort of continue having a conversation or connect with you directly.
Absolutely. Yeah,
that includes me. I have sent you a LinkedIn request that has not been accepted.
Oh, I thought I did.
I did. Well, no worries. Yeah. So thanks a ton again.
You're very welcome.
And if there are no questions from the audience,
I'm going to do it right now.
We can wrap it up. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, and have a great rest.
Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together virtually for Caroline sharing her insights and the story at Philips. Thank you.